Well, welcome back. And as Charlie said, we'll begin. We have two parts. One is this one, and then the second part will be another subject, okay? But before we go on, we have some matters pending, okay? And one has to do with very important things. The first one is the sweet potato poem, okay? Recall, I was remiss in that I showed it to you and didn't say anything on how you make it, okay? So I decided to correct that, and you have it, okay? You should have it. And as you would expect, this varies a lot, okay? But as near as I could dig it, it's as closest as it was here in the say 100 years ago or so. Then also, need to remind you that there was the big pie survey. You know, this was done, I don't know, some years back. And do you like pumpkin or do you like sweet potato? And well, they're hardcore pumpkin likers. They're hardcore. These guys could be so. But right here, this is the sweet potato pie belt. There's no question about it. Okay, so let's get that settled. All right.
Those are elastic belts.
And I'm sure you all have different, recipes and so on, but there is no doubt that is the sweet potato belt to the south. Okay. Oops. And then there's the Southern Corn poem. And I dug and dug. This is as close as I could find, okay? And I spent time doing to what was originally antebellum during the Civil War. It's a very simple thing, and if you were up during the Civil War, this part was out. No eggs, no buttermilk. So what you had was the corn, okay? And maybe you will have a little bit of lard put in there instead, and that was it. Boil it and eat it. And for several years, that was all there was. Okay. Okay.
What about cracklings? I don't see cracklings.
What is that?
Cracklings. He asked about cracklings.
Crackling? Yeah. What about it?
Pork rind, the cornbread.
That was something else. Cracklings is what's left over after you render the lard, and it adds fat to the cornbread.
Oh, okay.
That's the reason I was asking.
And it adds flavor too. But you gotta have fat to have cracklings, and in the Civil War they didn't have the fat. They didn't have the pigs.
My bad.
So, in the Civil War, what they had and were eating was Italian polenta. That's what it was, Okay. Also, I talked a lot about Haiti and so forth and up and down and so on, and I left you without a conclusion. So what happened? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Nothing. They were left alone. North, south, west, nothing. Nobody wanted anything to do with them. And this was sad, very sad. And the country has been in a mess ever since. They lost their forests. Remember that the fighting was done in the forest where the French were decimated. There are no forests anymore. It's all gone. And I need to say no more, except that it's a very sad story. Okay. Today we're going to talk about land and slaves and the need for land, political power, removal of indigenous population, and more on the need for cheap human labor. Let's begin. Land, of course, is a component of the production of cotton. You don't have land, you can't have cotton. Okay, so that goes without saying. Someone in the early part of the 1800s in Putnam County, Georgia, said, when we appear to have but one rule, that is to make as much cotton as we can. Lands that once produced 1,000 pounds of cotton to the acre will not now bring more than 400 pounds. So this is planting cotton after cotton after cotton. There was a sense of an irreality about the importance of cotton. But actually, as I will show you, did agree with what was going on in the economy of our republic. This from the American Cotton Planter in 1853, a quotation: "The lever that wields the destiny of modern civilization." That was cotton. Okay. By 1820, cotton constituted 32% of the exports, compared to 2.2% in 1796. By 1796, there was no cotton. So in this short time, more than half of all American exports between 15 and 1860 consisted of cotton. Just think about that. More than half of all the exports of the nation was cotton. Okay. Cotton became an increasingly vital unit in assessing the American economy. All right? Keep that in mind.
Right. On the prior slide, the quotation, he said that land that used to produce 2,000 pounds
Yeah.
of cotton per acre, that's not expressed in bales, and that's the way they express it now. But how would it compare?
Rod has a little trouble hearing the comment, so he asked me
I
if
know.
I would respond if I can. And the question was about how do you express cotton production, and there are lots of ways. Land planted is one. Before the Civil War, they expressed it in bales per acre or bales produced was the way they expressed cotton. We know a bale is about 500 pounds of cotton, more or less.
Right.
There's another thing that confuses the issue. I like the concept of bales because we know it's about 500 pounds. That previous slide, Ron, if you'll go back one, says 1,000 pounds of cotton. That's seed cotton.
Seed.
It takes about between 1,300 and 1,400 pounds of seed cotton to produce one bale of 500 pounds of lint cotton.
Okay.
Cotton is sold based upon the lint, not the seed cotton. So that 1,000 pounds of cotton, there would be about 300 or 400 pounds of actual lint. Now we get down here to 400 pounds. That's a little over 100 pounds of lint. Next week I'll show you a slide that shows that in the late 1800s, the yield of lint per acre was actually about 100 pounds. That was the average. That means some were producing more, a lot were producing less. On the old rotation that we visited last week, in 1896, they were getting about 100 pounds of lint. Today, we're getting close to 2,000 pounds
Yeah.
off of our better plots. So that kind of puts it into perspective. Yeah, 100 pounds 100 years ago, 2,000 pounds today in our better plots. So this is amazing what's happening.
And added to there was some confusion because the size of the bale changed. Today we got it standardized 500 pounds. Okay, that was not always so. Okay, so going on. Okay, venture capital. Remember, cotton was new, and everybody knew there was a lot of money in it. Okay, so venture capital, mostly British, but also European and New York investors supported unlimited support for land acquisition so that you can grow cotton. Okay. support tolerance of coerced labor, slavery. Okay. In fact, the slaves were used as a collateral, not the land. Everybody had land. So the collateral on loans and was the slaves. Unparalleled political power, okay? And there was a military, could speak of a military-cotton complex. Unparalleled political power, what do you mean? We get into this. The 3/5 compromise. I like to go a little slowly on this because it's a little difficult to understand, at least for me. But to understand it really, I have to dig back, way back. Remember when I said that Columbus made a report to Queen Isabel and made Queen Isabel angry because he was thinking about slaves and she was thinking differently. This was passed on to be studied, and it went on into a period where the Indians were attached to encomenderos, people that would take care of them, okay, and turn them into Christians and so forth. That didn't happen. There were then complaints about the Indians being mistreated, treated as slaves and so on, and the emperor, her grandson, Emperor Charles I of Spain, 5th Roman emperor, Holy Roman Emperor, kept hearing this thing and reports that they kept coming. So then he thought of having a debate, a discussion on the issue. And the issue was to be discussed in Valladolid. Okay, here's Madrid, here's Valladolid. Valladolid is really where Spain was born. So it lifted the importance of the debate to the place that is most holy, or it still is, in Spain. Few people know this. Okay. And it was to be, these two were married. That's Isabel and Fernando. They were married here in Valladolid on October 18, 1469. That was the day that Spain was born. Okay. So then the emperor chose, I think deliberately, to have the debate at that level of importance, at the center of the empire. Okay? Oops, I jumped. Go a little bit. It lasted from 1550 to 1551. Was the first moral debate in European history. By the way, I do not know of any other debate in the European history that I know that had this level of importance. And it was to discuss the rights and treatment of colonized people by colonizers. It was held, I repeat, in the city of Valladolid, and the main protagonists were really heavy duties. I mean, they were well-learned people, theologically, in the knowledge of law and so forth. One on the right, this is Sepulveda. Sepulveda, we will call him today a conservative, okay? He never saw Indians, never was in the Indies, but knew all about it. And what he paid attention to was, time and again, the Spanish will run across the Indians sacrificing people, okay, doing cannibal things, okay. And at the same time, and this is important, he notes, at least in some cases, that while they were doing all of this, they had this magnificent, from an engineering point of view, structures built. Sepulveda concluded, really, these people are in the hands of the evil one. They're possessed by the devil because they show they have intelligence, the structures, and yet they're doing these things. All right. I'm not going to go through all of this. And believe me, it's difficult to translate because they use legalese, it's all the same, and then I really had to scratch my head to say, what did they mean by this? So I came in with some of this, that the injuries and extreme misery which the Indians used to inflict and still to inflict today on a great number of persons whom they used to sacrifice each year, the evil spirit should be stopped. Then he argues that stopping means war. None of this business of being nice to them. You have to subjugate him, take him, and then Christianize them or force them to accept the Christian religion. So he was a hard man. He believed in that. That once those regions have been brought under control, the gospel of Christ can be preached by consecrated man and without danger. All right. Opposite, the exact opposite to this man, both learned men, except that now Las Casas had been Bishop of Chiapas, spoke the Indian languages, and had everything that Sepulveda had, except he had direct contact with the Indians. It is unlawful to force the Indians to the faith by war. That's just unlawful. The kings are commanded to have as their purpose leading the Indians to the faith, Christ's glory, and the truth of the gospel. Okay. He definitely says war is not a suitable means for spreading Christ's glory and the truth of the gospel. The kings of Castile can neither directly nor indirectly do anything that is opposed to the spiritual or even the temporal development of those people. And he goes down here and said that they'll be led to the faith by meekness, charity, holy conduct, and so on, as the Pope dictated. He believed, in other words, the Indians will have a life, an idyllic life like this. Into it, the missionaries would intercede and try to convince him to come into the faith without force. All of this, and it was a long debate, and there are volumes written on this. My conclusion is the Indians were recognized as, remember, it started out questioning the humanity of the Indians. This was on the table. So they recognized that they were to be converted in this and treated in the same manner as any other subject of Her Majesty. So there was no difference here. The status of the Indians significantly relative to the way they improved, relative to the way they were treated by other European powers later. Okay. Black Africans, here we go, cotton. Well, if you do that, you're not going to have plantations. So they suggested black African slaves were proposed as good labor substitutes for the Indians. Okay. All right? Fast forward 200 years. So we come to this, the 3/5 compromise. Legalese again. Sum total, if you had 100 slaves, they were your property, and so was their boat. But the 3/5 said you don't have a 1-to-1. You get 60 boats, 3/5 of the 100. So you now have 60 boats plus your own. That's what he said. And I'll give you samples of the discussion. The southern delegates to the convention would have been very pleased to having a 1-to-1 relation, okay? But then Eldridge Geary, who was the fifth he was acting vice president of the nation, said, why, I asked, should the blacks who were property in the South be in the rule of representation more than the cattle and horses of the North? That was said. Okay. Counting the slaves provided an incentive to import more slaves. Okay. Slaves were to be counted as less than whites for representation, which was not in the interest of the South. 3/5. Okay. Slaves were, however, counted as less than whites for measuring the state's apportioned direct tax liability. Well, that was to the benefit of the Southerners. Okay. Understood in context, and I said, please, I told you from the beginning, think the way people were thinking at that time. If you sift it through, in the context, the apportionment rule was not pro-slavery. Even though slaves were property under the laws of the southern states, the Constitution itself acknowledged that they were persons. So we started with the Indians, they were persons. Now we're dealing with Africans, and they were persons. At least they got that. It's okay. And why do I delve so much about this 3/5? Because it's political power. Think of this guy that has 100 slaves, he gets 60 votes. One that has 1,000, he gets 600 votes, okay? And you vote together, you control Congress, okay? That it was simple as that, okay? So that's why, forgive me for going into all of this detail, but you have to understand, where did this political power come from? There you have it, okay? When you need political power to effect removal of indigenous people from their land, clean them out. And you go to Congress, you pass the laws, they get the money, and there he goes, okay? So there was the Louisiana Purchase, 1803, the Florida acquisition for the Spanish, who didn't want it, but they got some money, 1819, the annexation of the Texas and later through the Mexican-American War, 1845 and later. And see, that was the Louisiana Purchase. This belonged to Spain, but by the time of the 1820s and so on, that had become Mexican, and it became, through the war, became part of the U.S. And so it was a lot of territory available. Okay. Summarize it, by 1850, 67% of the U.S. cotton was in land that was not in the U.S. territory 100 years earlier. Trail of Tears. You got to remove the Indians, okay? Thought about the Indians growing cotton? No, get out. That was as simple as that. So you had all these people, Cherokee, Choctaw, Muscovies, and so forth. It became what was called later the Trail of Tears. Really was, and I'm not going to go into this, there's plenty written about it, conflict and wars with indigenous population defending really their ancestral land. Okay, this is all. Then it came the Indian Removal Act of 1830, okay? Proposed by Jackson, it passed, and it gave Andrew Jackson believed that the Indian Removal Act happened on May 26, 1830. Surprisingly, Andrew Jackson, the 7th president, was for this law. Okay. He said the Native Americans should be moved for their own good. It gave Andrew Jackson power to do whatever he needed and saw fit for the purpose of eliminating the Indians. And Jackson thought this was fabulous because it would allow the Indians to continue with their customs. You move them somewhere else, and there you can go on living as you always did. Well, it didn't work out that way. The Indians didn't do well. A lot of death and misery. Empty lands. Remember, you're dealing with people of a legal background. So when you say empty land, it goes to a principle, terra nullius. This principle in Latin means nobody's land, no man's land, okay? And it's a principle sometimes used in today international law to describe the territory that may be acquired by a state's occupation of it. So you take the Indians out, there's nobody living there, okay? So the state comes in as mine. And then beginning with Georgia, as you pointed out, Charlie, they actually told people, go in there is nobody, take what you need, and that depending on the number of slaves you had and so forth, and it's yours. It was as simple as that. From 1830 to 1850, all these Indian populations were moved into Indian territory, roughly where Oklahoma is, but it was a little larger. Now, taking care of the land aspect. Okay. But you need land, you need water, but you also need energy input. What do I mean? Slaves, any slaves. And I'm not going to get into the slave thing because there are lots and lots of books and treatises and all kinds of documents on it. All I tell you is this is what a slave ship looked like, and there are even more horrible things like this. So if you want to get deep into it, I'll suggest some reading. You have to ask yourself, who was doing this? The English was doing it, the Portuguese were doing it, and the Dutch were doing it. The Spanish, a little, but not so much. You see, they could buy. They had a lot of money, they could buy them, okay? But again, I go for the soul of these people, the slave traders. They did know, at least some of them knew, that what they were doing was wrong. And the best example I can give is John Note, who wrote this beautiful, absolutely beautiful hymn, okay? Amazing Grace. And he goes on and on. And it was that he repented after being a captain of a slave ship and being in the slave trade for many years. He said it's wrong. He repented and wrote this. I use this as an example because people don't, they say, what was going on through the head of these people, okay? And nations. Here's some reading. Thomas Hugh, 1997, The Slave Trade. I highly recommend this treatise. It's really, really good. And then if you want to go and know details about the slave ship, here's one. And our own Bridges, Alabama, covers quite a bit of it too. So this will give you plenty of literature, but that will require several courses to go, so I'm not getting into it. Sequels to the Haitian Revolution. Okay. There was less competition. Since the Caribbean, Haiti included, no longer could produce or would produce cotton, there was less competition. So it was good for the South here. The British and European textile manufacturers became more dependent on imports of American cotton. Knowledgeable French planters. Remember, nobody up until the early 1800s here knew how to run a cotton plantation. But the French who survived and went to Louisiana set up cotton plantations and shared the knowledge all across. So you see, all these things are linked, okay? Sequels, how to prevent a rebellion. You need power. You need military power. Need to have a strong military trained militia to maintain coercion over the slave population. Acquisition and use of political power. I already covered that. So they had the political power. So, okay, I'll stop here because I think we'll continue. Okay. Questions? Okay. All right. If you don't have questions, I'll enslave you.
One legacy I can see is the attitudinal legacy of, well, we have the power and we have a right to speak for blacks.
Oh,
Because that was implicit in the three-fifths rule and all that. Whoever had the power had the right to speak for this group. And
yep.
that persists to this very evil day.
But I'll have more to say on that very subject. It's a very good comment, very, very good comment, because there is an undertow here that has to be. Anyway, we'll get into that later. Okay. All right. Well, let's take 5 minutes or so and come back. Okay. To continue with this slave thing, I thought some figures would be illustrative. In the 1790s, the slave population of Georgia doubled to 60,000. By 1810, was from 20,000 in South Carolina to 70,000 in 1810. Okay. In South Carolina, the 4 upland counties. Okay. 18.4% of the population. 1790, 39.5 in 1820. By 1860, the beginning of Civil War, 61.1%, but more. Where did the slaves come from? You see, in 1807, Congress bans the importation of slaves effective January 1st, 1808, the earliest date allowed by the Constitution. They were urgent about it, but they did allow internal slave trade to continue in states where the institution was legal. Okay. Well, it was very simple. Remember the last lecture that, you know, we paid a price by becoming independent from the Brits. The Brits weren't interested in our tobacco. They didn't care for the indigo, and certainly could get rice from anywhere. So we were the tobacco growers, Virginia. They would sell or move down, either sell their slaves in Georgia, South Carolina, or actually move down the whole operation. But to what you were saying, if you look over the period certainly from before or the Civil War on to the 20th century, this thought prevailed. Remember the Gilded Age? okay? 1865, 1914, which I define, you can do whatever you damn please, excuse the word, okay? A Harvard historian, this is not a Southerner, okay? This is a Harvard historian, writes this. In short, Negroes were a black, servile race, senseless, stupid, brutish, obedient to the whip, children in imagination. I just say, wow. This was published in 1882 by a Harvard historian. Not a Southerner. This belief and attitude, and this is my opinion, it's an opinion, persisted into the 20th century, causing great damage and mistrust with serious social, political, and economic consequences. What are you saying? Yeah, we did good, but we could have done better and much faster than it took us, my opinion. Okay. But you see, the slaves did rebel almost from the beginning. The first African slave rebellion was in today's Dominican Republic. 10 years after they were brought in to work the gold mines down there. Some example. And these are examples of the big ones. Rebellion, 1739, 1741. This is an interesting one. This was in Louisiana and almost succeeded. Almost succeeded. This guy knew about the Haitian successful rebellion and received knowledge. And what they did, they rebelled in a plantation where the militia had their arsenal. So they, of course, destroyed the plantation, got all the powdered and shot muskets and so on, and they lasted almost 2 months until someone professional engaged them. They ran out of powder and shot, so that was it. They were wiped out. So the suspicion, the fear of a Haitian rebellion like rebellion was true, and it did happen. So what to do? Okay. So we're going to get rebellions. So what to do? Most of them were things that lasted 1 or 2 days, and somebody will go, Charlie said, to the swamps or go to the woods and so on, but in the end, there was nothing. They would get caught and killed or whatever and brought back. Right. Where you go where the knowledge is. Cuba had large sugarcane plantations, and I mean large. So let's import know-how, trained personnel, and equipment. Okay. This happened. Cimarron is a term for escaped slave. Jíbaro was the Cuban term, but it was the same thing as escaped slave, who goes into a palenque. Palenque is really a fortified place by the escaped slaves. And every time you engage them, you had a war going. Okay. Ranchador, here's one. These are companies, groups of people trained for the purpose of, engaging and bringing back the escaped slaves. In fact, the Spanish had the royal rules for cimarrones, established rules and procedures for the handling of escaped slaves by ranchador companies and businesses. So they had a lot of knowledge, okay? And then they had equipment. Isn't that a pretty thing? This was developed in the island of La Palma, the Canary Island, consisting original mixtures of wolf dog, which have, the smarts and so on, and mastiffs that have the body for it, and you get this, and you get that, okay? The dogs were brought to the Americas right from the beginning. This to help their military, and of course later, everybody used them. The dogs were imported from Cuba into the South initially to help hunting the slaves, and later during the Civil War, and of course the South began producing them here. Okay. I couldn't resist, but here's La Palma, this little bitty island here, and it's in this town where to this day they breed dogs. You go over there and you write what you want, and they'll breed your dog, okay? This is, but it's not an organized company. There are people that are very good at it, and indeed they succeed. Look at this beautiful thing. It's a shepherd dog. If you want it another color, here you have it, okay? But they do that, so just a footnote, but it's. If I go there now and ask them, do you know that you were breeding, slave tracking dogs? Oh, come on, we don't do that. Okay. All right. And we have then, from the year 790 to 1860, already, and thank you for the data, Charlie. You see that U.S. cotton production, okay. Slave population, zoom, okay. 1 to 1. Some figures. Alabama in 1860, 45% of the population was blacks, okay. And it will go up and down. South Carolina, 57%, and down to Delaware, 1.6. I don't know what he was doing there, but overall was about 33% of the total population were slaves. Okay.
And those were actual numbers, not the 3/5?
These are percentages of the population. In other words, the total population, 45% in Alabama were blacks, okay? And Charlie already showed you from a situation of nothing, okay? Empty lands, okay? Empty lands. Then it developed to something intermediate like this, and in the end, each point was a plantation. So in the end, it was like that. Okay. I'll summarize this part. The practice of continuous cotton production quickly led to the impoverishment of the soil and sharp decreases in yield. Okay. So you don't have land. The independence wiped out of your exports. Okay. So what to do? I personally don't believe in the manifest destiny. This was manifest destiny. You have no land now, and you got to go and look for it. And this caused a movement to the west. Okay? Need for new land. Okay? Political power, it was acquired and exercised to effect occupational removal, legal concept of empty land. Rapid increase in slavery. Needed to sell the empty lands, okay? Go ahead.
Rod, the number one practice of continuous cotton production, was that because of wearing out the chemicals in the soil, or was it erosion, or was it a combination of
When I answered?
I I can answer that, and you saw it if you were with us when we visited the experiment right behind the
Right there.
Depletion of nutrients, but more importantly, soil erosion. There have been estimates that a foot of topsoil has been eroded away from the entire Piedmont. That's Alabama, Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, which was the center of cotton production in the early 1800s. A foot of topsoil is gone. It's washed out. You can see that right here in Alabama, especially if you go up to Chambers, Randolph County, Alameda County. That land is not there anymore. It's gone. So it was erosion first, but also the depletion of the nutrients. And you can look at, but I had good no erosion out here. But you can look at the plot that has had no nutrients applied to it. It's dead. It's sterile soil. Nothing will grow there.
Yeah, you had to also, if I may add, the soils, even in the beginning, sand, sandy loams, clays, and so on, really were poor. But they depended on the organic matter that accumulated, and that was wiped out by monoculture. But then, okay, give me a few minutes because we need to change to the next presentation. Okay. Okay. I'll show you some pictures now of what happens. Yeah, there we go. Thank you. Now we're going to talk about the Southeast, Mother Nature, and a little bit of science. Okay, we're going to get into science now. Okay. Perils of monoculture, fertility, pest diseases, and yield decline. George Franklin, Atkinson, and suppressive soils, Charles, and rotations and cropping system. Most of this, Charles has already done a super job, but I'll repeat it. I'll repeat some of it, but quickly, okay? Okay, remember, there was this statement that we appear to have but one rule, that is to make as much cotton as we can, lands, okay? So that. And that there was a movement, because of that, there was a movement to occupy the empty lands, and because they didn't need the land to grow cotton, so it was from going all the west, and eventually ended up in Texas, okay? I use the German term because it involved not only need to push, but also there is a soul thing involved here too. So, Drang nach Westen, okay? And then, okay, there's something behind that. The newly emptied lands, portable slave labor, and the new ginning technology allow cotton to be transferred to the new territories. Just take it up, move it, occupy the land, and go, okay? Simple as that. Monoculture, let's define it. The planting of a single crop species continuously without change to other crops or even follow. No. Okay, that's what we have. And remember I showed you the Southeast. We'll be talking about this now. High rainfall, most soils of low fertility leached, okay? They leach easily. Sand, sandy loam. Ideal for weeds, damaging insects, nematode problems, and other soil-borne pest diseases. It's a long list, okay? If you insist in not succeeding, you will succeed, okay? Subtropical hot summers and mild winters. Boy, they love this. And row crops, okay. An example, I already showed you this when I covered the Bahia grass rotation. Okay, this is one of my experiments. And you see, this is properly managed cotton, okay, of which you saw examples last week, you know, and when we visited the Coleman rotation. And this is not, this is monoculture. These are the same varieties, okay? And they fool you because you make some cotton and you gradually don't realize how much you're losing per year of monoculture. It fools you. And then you lose track that you could have had this. Okay. If you have peanuts, you bought the farm. Because from the first year, after the first year of monoculture, you start losing. And you first see this, and you wind up like this. What is not worth harvesting. It takes 3 years. 3 years of monoculture. Cotton, it takes longer, but peanut, for a lot of reasons, collapses. Okay. Okay. And Charlie will talk about King Cotton, the humble peanut, okay, taking over. And this guy really came from Mexico, and it's somebody that knows a lot more than I do about it, came from Mexico, but found an ideal situation for reproduction. Lots of cotton, no enemies or anything. Wow, thank you very much. But anyway, you'll talk about that. So this is a consequence of, cotton after cotton, and the value expands. So you can say kind of almost a black humor that cotton actually introduced new crops to us, okay? Peanuts, all right? Okay. You been on campus? Of course, that's Comer Hall. And somewhere up here, in this area, there was a person that was very interested in what we're talking about, the old rotation. He did participate in the design of this, of the old rotation, working with Duggar. Do you want a drone view of it? That you saw last week? That is cotton after cotton, and here you have a properly sustainable system. And I don't think you need to discuss it at all. It just, it tells you right away. One weakness that the corn, the color rotation, and soybean rotation have is, if you have land that has been exploited down to very, very low yield, it takes years to recover through this rotation. It's good, but you're going to need 4, 5, 6 years before you can bring it for that very low land. And that is one weakness it has. And we dealt with it. I'll show you how you do that, okay? This guy, Charlie doesn't like him, but I love the guy. I'm exaggerated, okay? Because this guy was obsessed, talking about an obsessed person. He was a mycologist, and he was obsessed with rust, okay? And he kept looking at rust. I don't think he was a good microscopist, because he said, no, this is a fungus. A fungus is causing this. Well, it turned out it was potassium deficiency. So ever since, he's been a bad guy with the fertility guys.
Well, we acknowledged him on the...
I understand. I'm kidding. But anyway, big guy. He was very knowledgeable in studying anything to do with diseases of cotton and published extensively on it. He was a good observer and found that some soils, some areas really were suppressive, never had problems with soil-borne diseases. And he called that suppressive soils. So he came up with the concept of a resistant soil, soils that were resistant, and you had to many reasons for it. And from that, developed the concept that there are rotation systems, cropping systems, that enhance resistance, that is suppressiveness of soils against pathogens. So, a third one. Nobody, it was a world, a very Cartesian world, like this, then, very analytical. Agriculture is non-Cartesian. You have to take the system as a whole. He was the first person that said, there are problems in cotton that are caused by fungi in combination with nematodes. And he came up with something called a complex. Now he was taking a look at the whole thing. Everybody then was isolating a pathogen. This caused this disease, this pathogen, this. He said, no. You have situations where the whole system becomes negative too. All right. So he's a big guy. Cotton rotation system. I showed you this one. That's the Bahia grass. Okay. What about other systems? We have the color rotation system and the old rotation system, okay? But many are possible with the climate we have. Some more example. Have you seen a sea of green? There you have it. This is a sea of green. There's no fixing photographically or anything. This is a sea of green. And it's the velvet vein. And in Spanish we call it pica pica, itchy itchy. Because if you try to harvest that thing, quickly you find out yourself doing this. And believe me, the only thing that will cure it is ashes. You have to have a base put on you. But anyway, that's a footnote. These are the countries. Look at the tonnage of dry matter that it can produce in one season. You see? Now, we don't need 3 or 4 years. We can do this in one season. And it goes from there, 10 tons, 12 tons, huge. And it's all over the world. That is the world that is suitable for velvet beans, tropical and subtropical. More. Here's the baby. Okay. That's one of the velvet bean varieties. That's the flower. The pods, in this case, they're yellow. And look, this guy is ready for anything. Every time you grow it, it throws back at you seeds of different colors, shapes, and so on. Broad genetic background. Come on. One of us will take you on, okay? So you always will get a good coverage, okay? Beautiful, okay? It's an annual. It's a creeper, okay? There are 2 types. And here we're going to start shining. There is a tropical long-term type, which was first tried in southernmost Florida, because it takes 8 to 10 months to produce a flower and seed. But in Alabama, you would just get this seed and no seeds. Well, that was no good. You had to import the seed and all kinds of problems. But because of this mix, some of our farmers, both in Georgia and Alabama, found that here and there were plants that matured within 5 months. And of course we call them the Alabama cultivar, okay? The bean was made available for the USDA 1902, 1903. By 1917, everybody was planting it because it was good. It was really, really good. And he was taking some of these exhausted soils out and into production with one single, optimally 2 years, but you could do it with one single year and then go back and plant cotton and get a reasonable yield. Here's in acreage, say, 1910, he went, whoa, again like that, and then he went down. What's going on? Very simple. Well, this is soybeans, okay? The problem with this, he doesn't make any money, any cash, okay? And soybeans, which really began in this area about 1930, started going up because you could sell it, you could do all kinds of things with velvet bean. That is, it's not an option. You cannot do. Okay, so we abandoned velvet bean. On top of that, the price of fertilizer, this is per ton, okay? Price per ton went from this level, $1,400 to $1,500, down to certainly under $500. That made it very attractive. I don't need legumes now. I don't need them because I can buy this fertilizer and I put the nitrogen and so forth, and that was the sales pitch. You don't have to use velvet bean. You don't have to do this rotation. Heck, man, you can take any soil, take sand, put fertilizer, and there you have it, okay? Okay? Well, we rejected that idea. We rejected that idea because there were questions about that approach of using just synthetic fertilizer. So we went back to the sea of green, combined it with corn like it was done in the early part of the last century, but decided that, yeah, you could get the tonnage and so on, but again, you couldn't harvest. You could do a little harvesting of corn. It was difficult to get the seed and so on. So we came up, okay, so this is too high. Well, we needed something lower, so we combined it with sorghum. Well, Charlie, this is mechanizable. You can harvest mechanically the velvet bean. Okay. Okay. Some figures. My eminent economist, Bob Taylor, he worked the figures. We did many experiments. In soybeans, you would get, under monoculture, 24 bushels. Put in velvet beans under same conditions, okay, same soil, and you would double, so 76.5% increase in yield. 1 year, okay. With cotton, 28, from 893 pounds, you will get over 1,000, okay. With peanut, if it was untreated, you didn't put any nematicide or any pesticide, okay, you would jump from and get 33% increase. But here's the kicker. Even if you use a velvet bean rotation in peanuts that have been adequately treated with the pesticides needed, okay, you still get 18.6%, okay? I call it the ignorance factor. There were things going on in there. And I'll tell you this, if you take a cotton plant and plant it in soil that had been in velvet bean, it grows. If you plant it in the same soil but with no velvet bean, here, those two cotton plants are no longer cotton. The cotton following velvet bean is another species. The microbiology and all of it has been totally changed, okay? So that you can no longer, you get the cotton, but the plant is not Gossypium hirsutum anymore, it's something else, okay? Profitability. Soybeans, you get nothing, 0.7. You get to $133 per acre. Cotton, $48 to $140. One difference, the difference, okay? 17, you gain 150. So the system works. And then you get this. I'm not kidding you. See, I'm looking, and there were people, when we were doing work with velvet bean, we got mysterious people coming in and asking for velvet bean seeds. And I didn't know about it. But then I dug a little and it's got L-Dopa. Well, L-Dopa, forget it. You know, you just go, shh, okay. Sexual power, okay? And there's one born every minute. And in fact, we kind of started joking with one of the kids, and we started feeding him 1 or 2 beans a day for a while. But he reported, no, nothing happened, you know what I'm saying? But yeah, but this is, anyway, I thought you'd get a kick out of that. New rotation. Now, we knew about velvet bean. So we wanted to bring in something that wasn't tried before, new, totally new, okay? I had seen in Brazil, my friends there and colleagues, they have what they call feijão de porco, okay? Pig bean. And we call it sword bean. Here's how it looks. That's the size of the pot. Here again, in combination with sorghum. Wonderful, really wonderful, okay? All right? Sword bean is a legume, again, you fix nitrogen. It has a very powerful root system. It drills through. That's true of velvet bean too. It goes through the hard pans, hard areas, compressed area. It will do it, okay? Tropical Southeast Asia, that's the origin, okay? It's growing all over. See all the tropical and subtropical areas, they grow. I go to Brazil, and what are you talking about? We've always been doing this. They always tell me that when there is a drought in a large field and they have this feijão de porco, everything is violet except this guy. It's green, okay? Where have you heard of a crop that can take shade? This is in the Philippines, using it as cover for banana and avocado production, Manila hemp. It's unheard of, okay? Somebody did an analysis of the Cannabalia is the genus of all these beans. That was in Florida, and they found a lot of it that is, again, very broad in genetics, okay? Look, that's the one we use, but there's also this, and there are many, many types and many, many uses for it. We like this concept. Rod, you mentioned Bahia grass, and then you said nothing about pastures. But every time depending on where you come from, you say pastures, alfalfa come to mind. And if you're in a dairy area, oh, we got to have alfalfa. In Alabama, in the South, forget it. Forget it. It is about the worst thing you can do. And when I say that, it's because we tried it. We absolutely wanted it to succeed, but never could. But you see, the world distribution, it doesn't agree with us. And in the U.S., there's a lot of alfalfa, but not here. The bugs come and they take it and destroy it. Okay. But what to do? We were not worried because we got something much better, much, much better, okay? And that's called, kid. Tropical alfalfa. And there it is. It looks like an alfalfa field, except it's better. Again, it has this penetrating root that goes down. It self-seeds. So you don't have to bother about it. Leave it there, and the next year the seeds come out, and they germinate in time, and you get a good crop. It's used all over the Central America, Mexico, Central America, South America, and here in Southeast Asia, including Australia. It grows to survive, and it does very well in most any soil. Very tough. So the knowledge exists. I gave you 2 crops that are new, and they do it quickly. They can take a soil that has been exploited, really impoverished, and turn it around just like magic. In a matter of a year, maybe 2 years, you bring it back to reasonable production. And that's quite a trick. I already showed you this. Climate of most of the southeast, hot summer, allows long-term management of these insect soil moisture. In other words, you get into these systems, not only you increase yields, but a lot of it is due simply to control of the pests that accumulate when you go into monoculture. It's as simple as that. And contrary to what they used to think, that cotton is a very sustainable crop in our system. Yeah.
How invasive are these plants?
The question is how invasive are some of these tropical legumes? We have experience with kudzu. Kudzu is also a legume.
Yeah.
And we know what happened with it. So some of these have that same potential.
It's an excellent question. And in fact, we here at our station are responsible for kudzu, okay? None. We take a look at that. And neither of those, not any of those, become invasive, what you call invasive, no. And remember, I've taken stuff that is invasive in the tropics and brought it over here, because invariably, to flower and produce seeds, they need a long, 7-8 months. They don't get that. I get the benefit, and then winter comes and kills them. So this is the case of hairy indigo. Okay. All right.
Are you familiar with partridge? I think it's a partridge pea.
Yeah.
It's another example of a tropical legume that Baby Rod has done some work with it, but our department has done extensive work with it because it's a good cover crop. You can plant it in June or July, and it is a legume, so it improves the soil, and it'll get head high by the time of frost. Because you can plant it behind a corn crop. Though the problem is, it's tropical. It does not produce seed.
But there is one now that
Auburn
is.
has been working the last 10 years to try to select one, like Dr. Rod pointed out, that will produce seed here, and they have been successful. The only problem is, it's in the family called Crotalaria. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Crotalaria, but it was also a tropical legume that was introduced to control erosion in the 1930s. And the problem with Crotalaria is its seeds are about the same size as a soybean seed. And if you planted soybean and Crotalaria anywhere close Then if the crotalaria got into soybeans, it's extremely toxic. The seeds will kill, one seed will kill a cow. So you don't want, so it was outlawed. You still find crotalaria growing in Alabama. It's a beautiful ornamental.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
It's a pretty plant. But the seeds are very toxic and they're the same size as the soybean seed. So it's illegal. This new plant that has a lot of potential is in the same genus as crotalaria, but the seeds are not toxic.
Yeah.
So we can't import it because we can't register the seed because it's illegal in Alabama. So it's a lot of issues there.
What do they do with that plant?
They mow it down and just use it as to improve the soil, the rotation.
And they don't use it.
But it's, in some,
The goats, if you want to turn the goats in on it, they love it. They'll eat it up.
and in some areas, sun hemp is used as a fiber crop, so that, but we do take into account very much, look at the possibility of things getting out of hand. Oh yeah, absolutely. Okay. Need I go through this? He already covered it, but I think what this reinforces, if that is the word, what Charlie presented you in the colors rotation. I'm not going to let you leave without meeting this guy. Okay. Remember, I said that the cost of fertilizer had dropped massively. A lot of it was due to this guy and this guy. They developed, he developed really a miserable system, but it did fix nitrogen from the air in the laboratory. Produced very little and very slow. Then he teamed up with a real engineer who told him, go, and I don't want to see you again. And then he built a plant and he started producing ammonia and urea and things like that derived from that. Okay. Why don't I like this guy? He gets a Nobel Prize. He gets a Nobel Prize, okay? Now I'm politicking, okay? In World War I, we just saw a class on it. This creep is responsible for gas warfare, chemical warfare. He suggested the use of chlorine, quickly followed by mustard gas, all from his lab. And he actually was so involved as to be at the front directing the release of this material. His wife blew her brains in his lab. Bang! Well, his background, he was Jewish, but he reneged, didn't want to have anything to do with his faith or anything like that. He wanted to be Germanized. And in his mind, to be Germanized was to, my country first, no matter what, if, hey, I got this gas idea. He's a creep. That's it. Okay. This process, though, is serious. Help with new crop varieties resulting great increase in agricultural productivity. Okay. The resulting ammonia from the Haber-Bosch process sustains 1/3 of the Earth's population. 1/2 of the protein in a human consists of nitrogen, originally fixed by the Haber-Bosch process. Okay, but look. Remember, it's cheap, use it, okay? Well, it leaches the large increase in fixed contaminated surface water, groundwater, and the atmosphere producing dangerous, so a whole lot of problems with that. This is the human population. We're following this model. It's a logistical model, okay? Haber-Bosch came here, and we're here. And part of this is due to this nitrogen fixing process, okay? Here's nitrogen, and we have phosphorus, but this is the principal culprit of the problems we had. Leaching into lakes, algal blooms, stuff like that. I'm not going to go through this because Charles has already covered. He handed out a brochure describing all of it. I have nothing to add to it. Summary. Continuous cropping of cotton in the same land results in serious depletion of fertility and decline in yields to unsustainable levels, okay? This situation led to research on the value of crop rotations, okay? Field experiments led to understanding of cropping systems. In other words, why do they work? And we get deep into it, and it's complicated. Long-term rotation, the value of rotation, the use of fertilizers. Okay? Thank you. Okay.